The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Good evening and welcome to my State of Mind. I am Dan Yorke. On this Monday, we take a look back to last Thursday when Governor Raimondo kind of issued a shot heard around the world in education. And it was viewed differently depending on where you were. If you were in far reaches of America, you heard this tough governor who was telling superintendents to look themselves in the mirror, get creative and work harder for the kids and keep them in school. If you were in Rhode Island, you had a bunch of superintendents and teachers who were looking at the governor and thinking, who do you think you are talking to us like that when we've been busting our tails to get it done? And since she's the governor here and not across America, it was a big mistake and a big problem. We'll talk about it tonight with Erika Sanzi, my go-to on education. Here's Anita's recap of the story.
Governor Gina Raimondo and several superintendents are at odds over whether students should learn virtually or in person.
I just thought it was not constructive, but rather shaming.
12 News reached out to more than a dozen Rhode Island superintendents to get their reaction to what the governor said at her weekly briefing. The East Providence superintendent is among the few to respond. Catherine Crowley says she was in disbelief of the governor's comments, including this one.
To the superintendents out there who've just decided to go virtual, I want you to look yourself in the mirror and ask if you can try a little harder, because I think the kids deserve better.
I can look myself in the mirror every morning and know I did make the right decision for East Providence, and I'm good with that.
The East Providence School District is moving to distance learning Monday because of staffing shortages. Quarantines have plagued some of their schools, causing even the assistant superintendent and school principals to jump into a classroom to fill in and teach. Head of the Rhode Island School Superintendents Association says because of staffing shortages, switching to distance learning isn't always a choice. It's what's needed to be done.
And they've tried to, and continue to try, to have kids in person as much as possible.
And so my education thinker, Erika Sanzi, is with us. She is published in a variety of places and has recently written on the governor's take last week, which I just found to be inexcusable. Good evening, good morning. We're recording this on Monday morning for Monday evening. Good to see you. You agree?
Yeah.
Excusable?
I do. I'm well aware that a lot of people thought she had crossed the line a long time ago with her tone about superintendents and other people not doing what she wanted. For me, last week was where I saw her cross the line in a way that seemed, well, let's put it this way. I am not known for my political instincts. And I have been told there is no way in the world that she will apologize publicly by people who know politics. But I am holding out hope because I truly do believe that she owes an apology to district leaders, superintendents, teachers, and parents. When you tell everybody that every day a child is not in school is a bad day for that child, you've now made a judgment, whether you meant to or not, of all the parents who chose distance learning for their children. So I just feel like it was like the tone was off, the words were wrong. And while I do understand and have been in her corner big time for her commitment to getting kids, keeping them in school and keeping them learning. I mean, she has been a leader on that. But last week, she just went too far. And I really do think that when you shame people, particularly people that are beyond exhausted because they're working so hard and they keep running into a brick wall, it just is not going to go anywhere good. How do you move the needle for children and for the community when you make people feel that way?
Yeah. Well, let's go backwards. I mean, this whole distance learning thing has been, look, remind ourselves, COVID stinks. COVID is an impossible thing to conquer until a vaccine, moves it from our system. And, knock wood, hopefully months, if not a year from now, we'll look back on it and feel a sense of normalcy with many things that will have changed for the good and for the bad with it. But it is, we have to keep saying nobody's got the formula fixed. Nobody expected this to happen. We weren't prepared for this in America. How could we have been? Yada, yada, yada. A lot of different thoughts across the country about how to go about this. And then there are philosophies and inconsistencies that are all over the map. So let's remember that. But this governor, along with the education commissioner, really talked a good game about getting back into school for the fall ever since we wrapped up distance learning by triage in the spring. My issue for her is you had to forecast a second wave.
Mhm.
And it doesn't seem like that happened. And so it just feels as this thing unravels, less so about the virus, more so about the actual staffing. It seems as if the governor is just frustrated over not having answers that perhaps she knows she should have had. I don't know.
Well, the other thing is, unless she can hand a magic wand to some of these district superintendents, there's nothing they can do. When you don't have enough staff to staff a building, unless you have a magic wand, there really is nothing you can do, especially when you're supposed to be keeping people in these sort of stable groups and stable pods. You're not supposed to have staff members floating. And I'm aware that there are some schools that are doing that. But again, it's like, first of all, when you say, look yourself in the mirror, try harder. I mean, to me, that's like the parent who just called a family meeting and is like reading the riot act to their children. Right? So, it doesn't make sense for the governor to be speaking to education leaders in that way from a public, podium during a press conference. Does she have reason to be really upset with some people in the state who run districts? I suspect she does. But again, that's not everybody. And she broad brushed it like it was everybody. And it just didn't land well, I'm telling you, because the detractors are never going to like what she says. But when you have people that have campaigned for you, that have supported you, that have publicly stood up for you and with you, this upset, I mean, I don't know, like, are we Fonzie here? Can't we just say, I'm sorry, real quick and move on?
I'll tell you why I think that's going to be a hard thing for her to do when we come back with Erika Sanzi, who recently, you wrote, what was the piece that you wrote? I want to be able to read the piece that you wrote that grabbed my.
I wrote, I have a Substack now, which is just called Sanzi Says. And I'd have to look up I don't know the website off the top of my head. But anyway, and I wrote about how shame is never a wise strategy. Why are you laughing?
Oh, that you don't know the website off the top of your head. That's funny.
No, because so the Substack is a little bit new, and I just have actually, okay, I'm gonna find it. But in the meantime, so that's where I wrote about it on this. And people should subscribe, actually, because you can subscribe, and then you'll get an email every time I write something. But that's where I put this piece last week, which I wrote. The press conference was Thursday. I wrote it Thursday night.
And we'll put a flash on the screen on it. When we come back, I've got a theory as to why we may not get an apology right away. Stay with us. Erika Sanzi stays with us on this conversation about the governor's attack. We'll be right back. Back here with Erika Sanzi. She writes on schools. She's a former school board member and a teacher, and has got a national audience in addition to being our go-to person here for conversations about education. This lash out the governor had suggesting that superintendents look themselves in the mirror and with a solution to just get creative.
And just try harder. Remember, just try a little harder.
Try a little harder. I'll get you my theory on why she may not apologize, but not that we're all getting up in the morning. Well, maybe some educators did get up this morning, still waiting for that apology. I don't think the rest of the world is losing sleep over her not apologizing. I think she did the damage to herself last week, and people just kind of, roll it into the entire deal. But I think one of the things that is really crucial here for people to understand is that, this governor has committed to the city of Providence, the state's complete authority. And unlike in years past, God forbid, if we had a tragedy or an epidemic or a pandemic like this, where all the systems would not be under her jurisdiction, the state's takeover of the city of Providence changes this equation completely. She constant conversation. Well, she may not be, but the superintendent, newly appointed head commissioner, and Helga Infante Green, have been in a constant grind with the American Federation of Teachers, and because she runs that district, she doesn't want to concede that other districts have done well by choosing distance learning, because she's committed that the city of Providence can't get there from here, and there are legitimate reasons why she's got concerns about that. The inequities of Wi-Fi and computer access and all of that. So it seems to me that changes the equation a little bit. For the first time, she's kind of running a school district de facto, right?
The problem is she doesn't have that confidence with all of the districts. And there's reasons why. I mean, it's very difficult to look at districts that have proficiency for reading and math in single digits, for decades, and then say, I suspect distance learning is going to go great here. So I understand that. And you don't want to be out there, saying, well, I trust you to do it well, so you can do it, but I don't trust you guys, or so you can't. I mean, that would also be a terrible way to talk about it. The problem is now she's almost swung to this other extreme where, well, I'm just going to shame everybody that closes, and I'm not going to even pretend that there are complexities and nuances, that make closing sometimes the only viable option, right? I mean, it's as if, and the problem also is, like, a lot of people listening to her, they don't know the complexities and the details. They don't know that some schools have, like, insane number of staff out, that they can't staff their buildings. So it's just not fair, because it's not honest. If you're going to talk that way about people, you need to present the facts of what's happening on the ground.
She knows them. I don't think she knows them. I think there's
which is further reason not to speak that way about people.
The disconnect between what seems to be the reality that superintendents and principals and all the way down the line that teachers are dealing with versus the administrative take on all of this. The commissioner and I need to have a good conversation about this, because I'm not exactly sure how much on the ground work is being done by those who are opining from a state position. And by the way, the formula for government in this whole situation is not lined up for this kind of authority. She is feigning authority. And I think that's frustrating her too. The superintendents report to elected school committees. The school committees have a responsibility to the constituency.
Yes, they do, for better or worse. Yes, they do.
You and I are online a lot of ways that the competency of school boards across the state is not very high. Thankfully, most school boards have at least one or two smart people on it, and that they keep the glue together. But this whole time, authority, permission, red light, green light, start date, blah, 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 Formula 4 was all really just another set of guidance. It's not authority. And finally, superintendents are recognizing, look, at the end of the day, I am looking myself in the mirror, and I'm asking myself, how can I run a school system with no teachers? How can I do this? Never mind the early starts for places like Pawtucket, which really have gone up her wazoo, because Pawtucket projected that the building safety and the actual protocols would cause them to offer a consistent distance learning program from Jump Street for the most part. By the way, I still predict that at the end of the school year, that Pawtucket will move up in what is a lousy scorecard of COVID, that Pawtucket will perform well. And she's upset about those things. So she's a mess right now.
I have 3 children home right now doing distance learning, right? It's not ideal. They don't like it. I picked up my kids on Friday when word got out that they were shifting to distance learning, my 2 middle schoolers, and they were upset, legitimately upset and disappointed. So for them, those 2 days getting to go to school, even in a pod, even in a mask, they like it and they prefer it. But it is what it is. I mean, am I going to start, saying cruel things and shaming the people who had to make this decision? I mean, it is what it is. And again, unless you can hand them a magic wand, I don't know what you want them to do. Our district was going to keep its elementary schools open, and has done that. But already they had to announce over the weekend that one of them has to close because they don't have the staffing and because of delays in contact tracing. So the other thing here is it isn't just school departments. They rely on the Department of Health. And if the Department of Health cannot get them information in a timely manner, and I'm not, again, maybe they can't, it could just be overwhelming. A superintendent can't just sit and wait, right? What are they supposed to do? Open their doors and send infected people into buildings and then find out 72 hours later, oops. Because then what are people going to have to say about that? They are in a no-win situation. And again, like I said in the piece, every organization has people that aren't trying hard enough, right? That's life. There's always going to be those people that mail it in and make their colleagues' jobs harder. We're not pretending for a second that isn't happening, in some places with some people. But to act like that's the norm, I mean, it lands on people who are beyond exhausted, working really hard, trying new things constantly, trying to figure out something that will work. I mean, even we have a teacher in our district who she knows that some of the kids can't print, mine included, because we can't get these Chromebooks to print. And so she makes all the copies and she leaves them in a basket on her front porch. And she leaves a bunch at the school, right? And the parent can go pick it up. I mean, that's not nothing, right? But as far as she knows, the governor thinks that she's not doing anything.
All right, where do we go from here? Long winter, a lot of school systems on distance learning until January 4th. Really? We'll be right back with Erika Sanzi. Stay with us. Back with Erika Sanzi. She writes a lot about education. Before we're done here, we'll make sure you know where you can find what she's been writing. Of course, former school board member and teacher. A lot of these distance learning plans right now are temporary. Some are more full-time, like Pawtucket and others, but for the most part, there's a lot of just, hey, gap decision making that I think is probably pretty smart. A couple of weeks before Christmas vacation, we were going to be out anyway. There's a lot of start dates on January 4th. What's your prediction as to how many will actually come to be? And for how long?
I have no idea.
Right.
And actually, my kids' start dates are later. I want to say I have a January 11 and a January 14th. Is that possible? I don't know. I'm not sure. But I mean, I think that one of the things that we need to accept, and perhaps this is another place where the governor she's minimizing how, uncertain this is like, can we just accept the fact that we don't know? Can we just accept the fact that people are responding in real time to really difficult situations? I mean, when school leaders are getting notified in the middle of the night about positive cases, right? And have to decide, do I send an email in the middle of the night to the families? Do I do a robocall at 6 a.m.? Do I close? Do I stay open? Do I do some sort of partial limited? I mean, it's as if you have this, like I said, I think last time I was on your show, it's like you have this impending storm every single night.
Well, let's not kid ourselves. Well, good news, the vaccine is beginning. It's going to be a 6-month, rollout over time. The virus is spiking out the wazoo. So the idea that this whole thing is going to wrap up for January 4th, it's not. It's not. And I just wonder whether what she said last week will have an impact on the way superintendents think. I don't think they're going to be bullied into this. And I wonder whether they're more or less like, excuse the term, well, up yours. Yeah, I'm running this show. I wonder if the human condition, a reaction to the look in the mirror and try harder and get more creative nonsense that came from the governor might just come back to haunt her, where they just default to doing it the way they want to, because who is she to tell them that way? I don't know.
I think a lot of people have really worked hard to be team players, right? And I think that that's part of why I feel like that press conference was so damaging. And again, part of why me and my political naivete still think that she might apologize publicly. But because you need team players in crisis, right? And in emergencies and in situations like this. And it seems to me that when you act that way, you know, you lose that. So you may be right. They may decide, you know what, I'm just going to keep talking about how the Department of Health, is delayed and we can't do anything. It just isn't. It's not healthy. It's not positive. It's just bad.
I don't think she's going to punctuate this. She may do the I'm sorry that some people were offended by my commentary type of thing, but she's not going to do a gut check, which is, in my heart of hearts, I know I screwed up last week. I mean, she doesn't need that on tape right now. She doesn't need that.
Well,
there's too much at stake. I mean, there's still some hovering from the Biden administration and some potential things going on there. Everything is fragile, and there's no possible way you're going to get that. In fact, the national audience may think she's actually, the national.
Oh, no, they do. Those sound bites played very well outside of the state, because remember, there are places in this country where there has been no education for kids since March, right? Where they would give anything to have a leader talk the way she did, because their situation has been so pathetic. So it played really well outside the state. The problem is those people that loved that don't know the details or the specifics.
It's often the case. All right, we'll keep in touch.
Good to see you always.
Sanji, real quick, where can people find you?
Sanzi.substack.com. That's just a new thing I started. Good School Hunting is also still up and running, and I also edit the national platform Project Forever Free. I already wrote something about the Google outage, everybody. Check it out.
The Valley Breeze. All right. Eric.
Yeah. And I actually have a piece that'll be in the Valley Breeze on Christmas Eve.
Final word, making back. Stay with us. The big key is, as more and more schools go to distance learning, what will January actually look like? My guess is a lot like December does, trying to keep the pieces together. We'll talk to you on the radio, weekdays 3 till 6 on WPRO. I'm back here tomorrow night. Thanks for watching. Good night.